I work the night watch at a remote aviary. That alone should tell you something's wrong with me. Who else would agree to sit out here in the woods, in the dark, keeping an eye on a collection of cages big enough to hold eagles, hawks, and owls the size of children? The building itself looks like a bunker. Concrete walls, a flat metal roof, only one real window. Outside, the cages stretch in rows, each covered in steel mesh, reinforced, because these birds are not pets. They're injured rescues mostly, or specimens kept for research. At least, that's what they told me. It's quiet here at night. Too quiet. Even the wind sounds muffled, like the trees are holding their breath. The first night I started, the man training me told me something strange. Half smiling, half serious. He said, "You'll hear things. Don't answer back. Don't ever answer back." I laughed at the time. Now, I don't. You're probably wondering why I took this job. Money? Sure. But it wasn't just that. I had nothing left tying me to the city. I wanted silence. I wanted distance. I thought the birds would be easier company than people. Turns out, I was wrong. The aviary holds 23 cages. The eagles are the centerpiece. Massive golden eagles with hooked beaks and eyes that seem too human when the light catches them. At night, their shadows stretch across the gravel like crooked statues. I swear they don't blink the way normal birds do. They just stare. And then there's the sound. The first week, it was only whispers in the wind. I'd do my rounds, flashlight, clipboard, checking locks, and I'd swear I heard someone say my name. Not loud, not clear, just a hiss slipping through the mesh. I told myself it was the wind. You tell yourself the same, wouldn't you? But the thing is, the wind doesn't call out in your mother's voice. It was the third night when I froze in front of cage 7. Inside was a bald eagle, wings clipped from an old injury. It looked half asleep, feathers puffed. And then, soft, in writhing voice, I heard it. Daniel. That's my name. My real name. I didn't move for a full minute. My flashlight shook in my hand. The bird's beak never opened, but its chest shifted like it was breathing heavier. The sound came again, quieter this time, like it had only been for me. Daniel. I wanted to run back inside, but I couldn't. My legs felt nailed to the ground. Do you know that kind of fear? The kind where your body betrays you? I just stood there, staring at the bird, waiting for it to do something else. It didn't. Not then. That night, I barely slept, and when I did, I dreamed of feathers falling into my mouth, choking me. By the 5th night, I noticed something else. The voices were never random. They knew things. Once, I heard my sister's laugh. She's been dead 10 years. Another time, I heard my father's cough, the one he had in the last week before the cancer took him. You might think I'm making this up. I wish I were. But here's the part that kept me from quitting right then. The birds acted normal when anyone else was around. During the day, the staff fed them, cleaned cages, took notes. Nothing strange. No voices. Just wings and feathers and the occasional screech. I even tried asking casually, do they ever make weird sounds at night? One of the caretakers, an older woman with gray hair tied back, looked at me flatly. Don't work nights if you can't handle silence, she said. Then she walked away. That's when I realized it wasn't something I could just laugh off. Something was happening, and no one wanted to talk about it. The next night, I tested it. I stopped at cage 12, where the biggest golden eagle was perched, talons curled around steel. I leaned closer to the mesh and whispered, "What do you want?" The silence that followed felt heavy, like the whole forest was listening. And then in a low rasp that shivered through my bones, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years, my ex. She'd left me a long time ago. Her voice came out of that bird's cage like smoke. "Come closer." I dropped my flashlight. It clattered on the gravel, beam rolling across the cages. The eagle shifted its wings, slow, deliberate, and I thought, for just a second, that the mesh bent outward, like it was breathing. I didn't come closer. I ran back inside, locked the door, and sat there with my heart rattling in my chest until dawn. That should have been enough to make me quit, but something in me wanted to understand. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was loneliness, or maybe it was just the way the voices kept choosing things only I could know. That night, I swore I wouldn't ask again. I'd keep quiet, keep moving, pretend I never heard anything. But around 3 a.m., when the cold sinks into your bones and the forest goes still, silence doesn't feel safe anymore. Silence feels like bait. And that's when the knocking started. Not from the cages, from inside the aviary building itself. The knocking woke me up like someone slapping my ribs. It was a slow, deliberate rap. 3, pause, 2, coming from inside the building where only I slept. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening, feeling the hair along my arms stand up. The radiator clanged once, then quiet. The knocking came again, softer this time, as if whatever made it had moved closer. I swung my legs over the bed. The air in the room smelled of stale coffee and raptor, a metallic tang that made my tongue ache. The aviary's nightlight hummed. A tiny square of orange under the door. Outside, somewhere in the cage rows, an eagle called. Long, a flat sound that didn't belong to any bird I recognized. It threaded through the knocking and left me wondering what was calling and why it sounded almost impossibly like the place where I grew up. I padded to the door and pressed my ear to the wood. The knocking stopped. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd imagined it. Then, something tapped the other side of the door, right where my hand rested. 3 staccato knocks. Not wood this time, metal. Fingernails? Talons. I thought of the man who'd trained me, telling me not to answer back. I remembered laughing at him. I imagined laughing now, and the sound came out as a cough. Do you know that feeling when your whole body wants to run and your feet refuse? I clenched my jaw and opened the door. The hall was empty, just the dim glow of the exit sign, the lockbox for the first aid kit, a neat row of boots by the wall. The knocking had come from the back storage room, the one with the extra feed sacks and the old sound recorder the researchers used for playback during therapy sessions. The door to that room stood slightly ajar. I leaned in and smelled dust, dry feathers, and something sharp underneath, like old money or burned paper. The air was colder there. My flashlight felt heavy in my hand. I pushed the door the rest of the way, and the beam cut across a mound of netting and blue work gloves. The recorder sat on a metal shelf, its red LED blinking as if it had been recording for hours. The tape inside must have wound down by now. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. My name thrummed in my chest, an animal heartbeat. Why was the recorder on? I flicked it off. The sound stopped, but my skin buzzed. On the floor by the shelf, something had been dragged. A long smear across concrete, like a hand had tried to crawl and then given up. It smelled of iron. I crouched, the bones in my knees protesting. There, half buried under a tarp, was a work glove with something stuffed inside it. I pulled the glove free. Inside lay a scrap of paper. Someone had written, in a hurried hand, a single word. Listen. My throat went dry. A million small culpabilities uncoiled inside me. The things I'd left unsaid to my sister. The money I hadn't sent. The way I let my father fade without visiting. Guilt is a quiet engine. It makes you brave for the wrong things. I wanted to leave the paper where it was and run back to the bed, but my head kept asking who had written it. Who had left a note in a room no one used at night? The aviary was supposed to be empty, except for me. I picked up the recorder, thinking to find out what it had captured. When I hit play, the first sound was a low wind, then my own voice, older, recorded, saying, "Do you ever hear them? At night?" I knew that voice. That was me, a month ago, doing night checks and talking to no one while I scratched names into the logbook. But then, another voice answered. It was not human. It was a rasp that made the hair along my arms lift. "They remember voices," it said. My skin went cold. The recorder caught a squeak then, talons scrabbling across metal, like someone or some bird had dragged itself along a wire. Then a phrase in a voice that was neither male nor female, but made of other people's syllables. It said, unmistakably, "Open it." I imagined what it could be. A cage? A mouth? My mind supplied images and refused to settle on any one. I turned the volume up. My name crept from the small speaker, soft as a cat's purr. Daniel. The voice matched the echo of my own, but warped, like someone singing behind glass. I slammed the recorder off and shoved it back on the shelf. My hands shook so badly, the flashlight beam leapt across the room and painted a strip of the concrete floor. Dust motes spun in the light like tiny galaxies. The radiator clanged again. Somewhere outside, an eagle thumped the side of its cage as if impatient. My chest felt like it had a bird trapped in it, wings beating. There was another sound then, faint, a high scraping, as if metal were being rubbed against metal very slowly. I followed it with my light to the far corner. There, pressed against the steel mesh of cage 3, something glinted. Not an eye. Feathers, but arranged wrong. Slick, wet, and reflecting the beam like coins. The bird inside that cage looked smaller than the others, but its plumage was like a smear of oil. It stared at me. Its beak moved, but no sound came out. The scraping continued. I stepped closer. The bird cocked its head. The scraping stopped. For a moment, we both existed in that narrow beam. Me smelling the earth on its feathers, feeling the roughness of the concrete under my boots. I wanted to tell you that I backed away. That common sense reasserted itself, but that would be the wrong kind of brave. I leaned close to the mesh and listened. At first, I heard only the soft tick of its breath and the blood in my own ears. Then, under the breath, words uncoiled like a ribbon. "Do you remember her?" The voice was not mine, yet it mirrored a thought I had not let myself think. My ex, the one who left. My muscles screamed at me not to answer. but my mouth formed the word before my brain could stop it. Who? I said. The scrape answered me like a fingernail. Another voice came, not from the bird, but from the darkness behind it, thin as paper and twice as sharp. It said in the cadence of someone reciting an address, Cage 3, behind the feeds. I turned. Behind the feed sacks, in a shadow I'd never seen before, something small and clumsy shifted. It was not a bird. It was the outline of a person curled around something, hunched, still. For a second, I thought it was one of the researchers sleeping off a night shift. My stomach narrowed into ice. I took one step toward the shadow. The thing moved, too quickly for a human, and the beam caught a pale face. It was not a face I knew. It was raw, like skin that had been stretched and shrugged off. Its mouth was wide and wet. Its eyes reflected the flashlight, like two small mirrors. It spoke without opening its mouth. You open the door. I should have run then. I should have slammed the door and called someone. But the thing said my name, my full name, and it spoke it with all the tiny condolences I'd never wanted to hear. The world constricted to the sound of that voice, and in the corner of the room, the metallic scratching began again, louder and nearer. I reached for the nearest object to defend myself, and the lights went out. When the lights cut, it was like the building itself inhaled and never exhaled again. The orange nightlight winked out. My flashlight trembled in my hand, its beam now the only slice of vision left, a thin blade cutting through pitch. Dust swirled in the cone of light like ash. The scraping sound stopped. I froze. The dark pressed against me, thick and alive. Somewhere ahead, in the corner where that face had been, I heard a slow shuffle. Skin against concrete, talons against mesh. My pulse thudded so loudly, I thought it might summon the thing closer. I whispered, barely audible, "Who's there?" And then hated myself for breaking the one rule I'd been given. Don't answer. Don't talk. My voice felt like an offering. For a long breath, there was nothing. Then, soft as breath against glass, came a whisper that wasn't human. You are. My skin crawled. The beam flickered as the batteries stuttered. I shook the flashlight hard, once, twice, desperate to keep the light alive. In that quick strobe of movement, I caught sight of the cages. The eagles were awake, every one of them, pressed against the mesh, staring. Their eyes gleamed in the beam, rows of coins reflecting back at me. Not one moved. Not one blinked. Then Cage 3 shuddered. Metal groaned as if bent from the inside. My heart rattled my ribs. I took a step back, my boots crunching on grit. Something, God help me, something inside pushed at the door of the cage. The lock trembled like a heartbeat. I backed into the storage shelf. The recorder fell with a crash, the tape spilling out like entrails. The sound echoed in the silence, and then all the birds screamed at once. Not screeches. Words. Hundreds of voices, human voices, layered on top of each other. A chorus of names, sobs, pleas. It rose so loud, I clapped my hands over my ears. But the voices pressed through my skull anyway. One of them was my sister, clear as if she stood right beside me. Danny, don't let them in. I stumbled forward, tripping over the tarp, the flashlight rolling. The beam spun across the cages, the floor, the shadowed corner. Gone. The pale face was gone. Only the smeared outline on the concrete remained, as though something had burned shape into the ground. The lights came back on, a flicker, then steady. The hum of the radiator returned. My ears rang in the silence. I stood shaking, holding onto the shelf like I'd drown without it. The eagles had gone still again. Every one perched normal, feathers ruffled, as if the chorus of voices had never happened. I wanted to leave. I should have left, but part of me needed to know if what I saw was real. I staggered to cage 3. My throat burned as if I'd swallowed smoke. The eagle inside looked small now, ordinary. It blinked once, slow, then cocked its head. Its beak opened, and in my father's voice, the voice he used the week before he died, it whispered, "You shouldn't stay here." The world swam. I fell back, hit the wall, and slid down, shaking. My chest hurt, like claws had scraped the inside. I tried to breathe, but each breath was a question. What had I just seen? What had I just heard? I sat there until dawn. The morning staff came, yawning, carrying feed buckets, their chatter ordinary, almost cheerful. No mention of screaming voices, no pale faces, no smear on the floor. Cage 3 sat quiet, its eagle preening, calm. I tried to tell myself I was sleep-deprived, hallucinating. That's what I told the staff when they noticed my hands shaking while I signed the log. "Didn't sleep much," I muttered. They nodded, uninterested. But that day, while sweeping the hallway, I found something wedged behind the boots near the door. A feather. Too long to belong to any bird I'd seen. Black, with a sheen of green when the light hit. The tip was frayed, like it had been dragged across stone. When I touched it, a voice whispered in my head, faint but undeniable, "You opened the door." I dropped it, heart hammering, but the feather stuck to my palm, clinging like static. I shook until it fell, but the echo of the voice stayed lodged in my skull. That night, I swore I wouldn't leave the building. No matter what I heard, I'd sit inside, lights on, book in my lap, ignore the cages. I thought maybe the thing fed on attention. Maybe if I didn't look, didn't listen, it would starve. At 2:17 a.m., the power cut again. Not just the lights, everything. The radiator, the hum of the freezer, even the clock on the wall stopped ticking. The silence was so deep, it felt like sound itself had died. Then, through that absolute silence, came a single sound. Not knocking this time, footsteps, inside the building. The footsteps came slow, deliberate, one after the other, each heel pressing down as if it wanted me to hear. I sat frozen on the cot in the staff room, flashlight clutched in both hands, the battery dimming again. My breath fogged the air, even though the room shouldn't have been that cold. I told myself it was one of the caretakers, maybe checking on me, maybe forgetting something. But caretakers didn't walk like that. They didn't drag their souls across the concrete like they were. Unfamiliar with how feet worked, the steps paused outside my door. The silence after was worse than the sound itself. I could hear my own heart, feel it in my throat. My father's voice replayed in my head, "You shouldn't stay here." I gripped the flashlight tighter, lifted it, aimed it at the door. Something pressed against the wood. A shape. A hand? No. It was thinner, longer, the shadows stretching down the frame like bird bones. Then it rapped twice. Not knuckles, talons. I should have kept quiet. I know that. But when the silence stretched, I whispered without meaning to, "Who are you?" The reply came instantly, from the other side, low and wet. "We are." The door handle rattled once. My whole body locked up. Then the footsteps moved away, scraping down the hall, toward the main aviary. I sat there, unable to move, flashlight beam quivering across the ceiling. After a long time, minutes, maybe hours, I forced myself to stand. The air smelled sharp, like feathers burned to ash. I crept to the hall. The emergency lights flickered weakly, painting everything in a pale red. The footsteps had stopped, but the sound of wings, unmistakable, echoed faintly down the corridor. Not the frantic flutter of trapped birds. Slow, heavy wing beats. I followed. My body didn't want to, but something in my chest pulled me like a hook. The aviary door was ajar. It should have been locked. I nudged it open with the flashlight. The beam cut across the rows of cages, catching glints of steel and eyeshine. The smell hit me first, earthy, metallic, like wet feathers rotting in a sack. The cages were all closed, every lock intact. But every bird stood pressed against the mesh, heads tilted, eyes on me. Not one blinked. The silence was absolute. Then cage 7, the bald eagle that had first whispered my name, shifted. Its wings spread wide, feathers brushing the bars, though it shouldn't have had the space. Its beak opened. My sister's voice came out. "Danny, you let it in." I dropped the flashlight. The beam spun madly across the room, catching glimpses, talons gripping bars, shadows leaning forward, the faint ripple of the mesh as if every cage was breathing. I scrambled to grab the light, my fingers fumbling. When I lifted it again, something stood in the aisle between the cages. It wasn't a bird. It was tall, human-shaped, but hunched, skin pale as stretched wax. Feathers jutted out of its arms in patches, slick with something dark. Its head was wrong, too long, with a hooked shadow where a mouth should have been. It didn't move. It just stood, staring, though I couldn't see eyes. The birds all whispered at once, a wave of voices hissing through the mesh. "Listen, listen, listen." The figure tilted its head. My chest clenched. It spoke in a voice made of many voices, layered together. Some I knew, some I didn't. "Open the cage." I shook my head hard. "No," I croaked. The lights flickered, and in the split second of darkness, the figure was suddenly closer. One step, then another. The birds pressed harder against the mesh, the steel groaning. My flashlight beam quaked. I backed up, heart hammering, my spine hitting the aviary wall. It stopped, just a few feet away. Its skin smelled like wet feathers left to rot. Its mouth opened, impossibly wide. But instead of teeth, there was only darkness. The voices poured out, each one a thread from my life. My sister, my father, my ex, my own voice from nights alone. "You are already listening." The cage beside me rattled violently. The lock trembled. Metal strained. Something was pushing from inside. The figure didn't move, just kept that impossible mouth open. The voices spilling. I slammed my hand against the door to the hallway, fumbled with the handle, and bolted. I didn't care about the noise, didn't care about anything but distance. My boots pounded the hall, the flashlight beam bouncing off walls. Behind me, the aviary erupted. Cages slamming, wings battering steel, voices rising into a cacophony that followed me down the corridor like a storm. I made it to the staff room. slammed the door, shoved the bed against it. My lungs clawed for air. The noise pounded the walls, then stopped, just like that. Silence. I sat there until the sun rose, my flashlight dead in my hands, my ears still ringing with the word, listen. When the morning staff arrived, everything was normal again. The cages intact, the locks secure, the birds calm. No figure, no voices. They asked me why the bed was against the door. I told them I thought someone had broken in. They shrugged, unimpressed. I should have quit. I wanted to, but something in me was already tangled. I couldn't walk away without knowing what it wanted, why it chose me. That curiosity, it was a hook too deep to tear out. That night, I swore I wouldn't speak, wouldn't respond. I'd just endure the shift in silence. But when midnight came, the birds began whispering again. And this time, they weren't just calling my name. They were laughing. The laughter was the worst sound I'd ever heard, because it wasn't just laughter. It was a patchwork of voices. My sister's giggle when she was 8. My ex's sharp laugh at the bar where we met. My father's tired chuckle the night he told me I should leave home and never come back. Dozens of them, overlapping, spilling from the cages, as if the birds were drunk on some inside joke that only I wasn't part of. I sat in the staff room, with every light on, a thermos of coffee untouched beside me, fists tight on my knees. The laughter rose and fell like a tide. It wasn't constant. It came in bursts, with long silences between. In those silences, I could hear my own heart drumming, the radiator ticking, the faint scrape of claws against mesh. I told myself not to react. Don't answer. Don't even think of answering. The man who trained me hadn't laughed when he gave that warning, had he? No. His eyes had been too flat, too heavy. But silence is its own kind of response. By the third burst of laughter, one of the voices changed. It sharpened. It asked, in a tone that was both curious and cruel, "What did you bury?" My breath caught. I hadn't buried anything. Not literally. But the question cut too deep, because I buried plenty in other ways. My grief, my failures, my regrets. And the voice knew it. I pressed my palms over my ears. The laughter didn't stop. It never does. Not when it's inside your skull. By 1 a.m, the voices had shifted from laughter to humming. A low, tuneless hum that vibrated through the walls, like the whole building was resonating with some secret frequency. My teeth ached. My bones buzzed. I left the staff room. I couldn't sit still anymore. I thought maybe walking would steady me. Maybe if I did my rounds, things would feel normal again. The flashlight beam cut across the hall, jittery from the shake in my hand. The humming grew louder the closer I got to the aviary. It wasn't coming from one cage. It was all of them, harmonizing. The mesh vibrated slightly, a shiver that rippled down the row like wind across water. The birds themselves hardly moved, but their throats pulsed. Their eyes gleamed in the beam, a constellation of coins in the dark. I told myself, don't stop, just check locks, keep moving. I forced myself past cage 7, cage 12, cage 3. Each step felt heavier, like the air itself wanted to hold me back. Then I heard it. A sound separate from the humming. A whisper, but not from the birds. From the far wall. Bricks shifted. I froze. The flashlight beam caught the faintest outline, a hairline clack running vertical down the aviary wall, where there shouldn't have been anything but solid concrete. The crack widened, almost imperceptibly, like the wall itself had been breathing and decided to inhale deeper, cold, sharp, carrying a smell that wasn't right. Earthy, yes, but tinged with iron and rot. The scent of a grave long opened. And then, from the crack, a single eye appeared. Not human, not avian. Too large, pale, rimmed in a red that looked raw. It blinked once, and the humming stopped. Every bird in the aviary turned its head to look at me. Perfect unison. I stumbled backward, the flashlight beam jerking. My boot hit something hard. I looked down. The recorder, the one I'd left in storage days ago. It lay on the floor, its red light blinking. When I bent, trembling, and hit play, the voice that spilled out wasn't mine, or my family's, or anyone I'd ever known. It was a chorus of whispers bound together, hissing in rhythm. Behind the wall, behind the wall, behind the wall. The seam widened another fraction. Dust trickled down. The eye rolled back, vanishing into dark. The birds screamed all at once, but not with human voices this time. It was the raw, tearing sound of raptors in fury, high and jagged. The mesh shook so violently, I thought the cages would burst. I ran. I didn't care where. Out of the aviary, through the hall, into the staff room. I slammed the door and shoved the bed against it again. The voices chased me, but softer this time, almost playful. The last thing I heard before dawn came was my own voice, from nowhere and everywhere, whispering, "Come closer, you have to see." When morning broke, everything was normal again. The wall intact, the recorder gone, the birds quiet. I told myself I imagined it. That stress was making me unravel. But when I checked the logbook, my handwriting was there on the last page. 3 words I didn't remember writing. I saw it. I stopped pretending after that night. The logbook entry killed my denial. My handwriting, no mistaking it. But I had no memory of scrawling those words. I saw it. The letters were shaky, slanted, written like my hand was being pulled along. I stared at the page for hours after the staff left, the aviary humming with its ordinary daytime noise. The birds preened, stretched their wings, snapped at food. Nothing strange, nothing wrong. But I couldn't stop thinking about that crack in the wall, about the eye. By dusk, my hands wouldn't stay still. I smoked a cigarette down to the filter, then another. The pack was gone before the sun dipped. My chest ached with each drag, but it was easier than sitting in silence. Silence wasn't silence anymore. When night fell, the weight returned, the sense that the forest pressed closer, that the cages waited for me. I sat on the cot with the flashlight between my knees, the thermos beside me, telling myself I wouldn't leave the room. Not tonight. Not ever again. But at 1:03 a.m., the humming began. Soft at first, like bees moving through the walls. Then louder. The radiator rattled. The glass in the window quivered. The birds joined in, throats pulsing, feathers shivering. The sound crawled down my spine until my teeth buzzed. I tried plugging my ears, humming back, even shouting to drown it out. None of it worked. The humming wasn't just in the air. It was inside me, stitched into my blood. And then the voices slipped back in, weaving through the hum. Not words at first, just syllables, But slowly, unmistakably, they shaped themselves. Come closer, come closer, come closer. I squeezed my eyes shut, rocked back and forth. No, no, the humming stopped. I opened my eyes to silence and realized the cot wasn't in the staff room anymore. The walls around me were concrete, yes, but rougher, darker, wet. Water dripped somewhere. The air smelled of earth turned sour, of rot and rust. My flashlight still sat between my knees, its beam cutting across stone. I wasn't in the staff room. I was inside the wall. I jerked to my feet, nearly dropping the light. The beam showed narrow passageways, stretching in both directions. Rough-hewn tunnels, too small for comfort. Feathers littered the floor, black and damp. Some still twitched as if alive. Behind me, the cot was gone. Only stone. The hum started again, but softer, deeper, vibrating through the walls like a heartbeat. I ran. I didn't care which way. My boots slapped on wet rock, feathers crunching underfoot. The tunnel turned, split, narrowed. I ducked under low arches, my shoulders brushing damp stone. My lungs burned. The hum followed, steady, patient. After what felt like forever, the passage widened into a chamber. I froze. Cages, not the steel aviary cages I knew. These were crude, made of stone and twisted wire, sunk into the ground. And inside each one, something shifted. Feathers, yes, but not right. Wings bent wrong. Faces too long. Beaks where mouths should be. They weren't birds. They weren't human either. One pressed against the bars, its feathers slick with something dark, its eyes milky white. Its beak opened and a voice poured out. My voice. Daniel, you saw us. I staggered back. The thing clutched the bars with talons like hands. Another pressed forward, its mouth opening far too wide, and my sister's voice spilled out again. Don't let them out. The chamber filled with voices, all of them familiar, all of them wrong. They layered over each other until it was a wall of sound. And in that wall, one phrase threaded again and again. You are already inside. The humming swelled. The cages shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. My flashlight beam jittered across twisted shapes, straining against bars. Then, from the far side of the chamber, I saw it. The crack in the wall. Wider. Now, a jagged mouth in the stone. Beyond it, only blackness. Something was moving in that blackness. Something bigger than the tunnels, bigger than the chamber. I turned to run back the way I'd come, but the tunnel was gone. Only stone. Only cages. Only voices rising higher, closer, pressing against me from every side. And then one of the cages gave way. The wire screamed as it snapped. The wire screeched like metal tearing from bone. The first cage collapsed inward, and the thing inside spilled onto the stone. It moved wrong. Its wings beat too slow, then too fast, snapping against the ground like broken sails. Its head twisted all the way around before fixing on me. And when it opened its beak, my father's voice came out. Daniel, you left me in the dark. My chest seized. I'd buried my father 3 years earlier. I'd seen his body lowered into the ground. Yet here his voice crawled out of an eagle's throat, threaded with static, bending the words until they felt jagged. I backed up, flashlight beam jerking across more cages. They were buckling, bending outward. Feathers poured through the gaps like smoke. Hands, no, talons shaped like hands, scrabbled along the stone. One by one, the cages burst. The chamber filled with motion. Feathers slapped against my face. Wings scraped against walls. Claws clicked on rock. Every one of them spoke, and every voice was stolen. My mother's laugh. My old boss's gruff bark. A girl I kissed once in college. Every sound I thought I'd lost. Alive again, warped and wrong. You hear us. You brought us here. Stay. The words tangled together until meaning dissolved into noise. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound was inside my skull, vibrating through bone. Then the humming stopped. All at once, silence. The creatures froze. Feathers still. Beaks shut. Their eyes, milky, glassy, some too human, some too bird, turned toward the crack in the far wall. And that's when I felt it. Not air, not breath, but pressure, a draw, like the space itself was inhaling. The blackness beyond the crack wasn't emptiness. It was waiting. The creatures bowed, slowly, mechanically. Every one of them pressed their wings or hands or twisted limbs flat against the ground. Their heads bent low. Submission, worship. The crack widened. Stone crumbled. A piece of the ceiling broke loose and crashed beside me. Dust blinding my eyes, grit in my teeth. I coughed and stumbled backward, and when I cleared my vision, I saw it. Not all of it, just a piece, a wing stretching into the chamber. But it wasn't feathered. It was stone and bone and smoke all at once. A shape that bent when I looked at it, reshaping itself like a shadow alive. The creatures began to sing, not like before, not voices stolen from the living. This was older, wordless, a vibration that made my ribs ache. The wings scraped across the floor, gouging the stone. The blackness pulsed, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw an eye. Enormous, lidless, a ring of pale fire, and it looked at me, not at the creatures bowing, at me. The voices stopped. The chamber held its breath. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My body locked as if the gaze pinned me to the ground. The flashlight slipped from my hand and rolled, its beams spinning wild arcs across the stone. Then, in the silence, a single voice rose. My own. Daniel, step closer. The words didn't come from my throat. They came from everywhere at once, from the wing, from the crack, from the very walls. My voice, but hollow, stretched, echoing. I shook my head, whispered no, but my foot moved, one step, then another. My muscles ignored me, moving like a puppet pulled on strings. I scraped my nails across my arms until they bled, trying to stop myself. It didn't matter. The pull was too strong. The blackness opened wider. The wing shifted. The eye glowed. And then a sound cut through it all. The shriek of an eagle. Pure, sharp, real. Not a voice stolen. Not a hum. An honest cry. I spun toward it, and there it was. The only eagle I knew by name. The one I'd fed every night since I took the job. Graybeak. He stood on the chamber floor, feathers ragged, but his eyes clear, bright gold. He shrieked again and lunged at me, slamming into my chest with all his weight. The spell broke. My legs unlocked. I fell hard, Greybeak flapping against me, his talons scraping but not piercing. And when I blinked, I was back in the staff room, flat on the cot, flashlight on the floor, thermos spilled, my chest heaving, my shirt torn where the eagle had struck me. The humming was gone. The walls were whole. But a single black feather lay across my lap, and it twitched. I didn't touch the feather, not at first. It lay across my lap like it had grown there, pulsing faintly, the quill twitching as if alive. My breath fogged the air, though the heater still rattled softly. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. Finally, I brushed it off me. It fell soundlessly to the floor, weightless as ash. The moment it landed, the lights in the staff room cut out. Black. Only the flashlight remained, rolling on its side where it had dropped earlier. Its beam spun across the room in circles, dizzying, catching fragments, the edge of the desk, the cot legs, the radiator pipe. Every spin made my stomach clench, because I knew, sooner or later, it was going to catch something else. And then it did. For a split second, the light crossed the far corner, and there it was. A shape, tall and bird-like, but stretched too thin, hunched so its wings brushed both walls. A neck that bent at a wrong angle. A beak split all the way back to where ears should have been. When the beam spun away, the corner was empty. But the hum was back. Not soft this time, not patient. It pounded through the walls, rattling the desk, buzzing my bones. My teeth chattered against each other, not from cold, but from the vibration. The flashlight beam spun again, and again it caught the corner. Empty. Another spin. The shape. Another spin. Empty. Each glimpse closer, nearer, until it filled more of the beam. And then the flashlight stopped rolling. The beam froze on the wall opposite me. Dead center. Empty. Until it wasn't. The shape stepped forward into the light. I saw its wings first, dripping feathers that melted into smoke. Then its legs, thin as poles, ending in claws long enough to carve stone. Then its face, or what it used as a face. Not a bird's head, not human either. Something caught between. Its eyes glowed faintly, the pale fire I had seen in the crack. It opened its beak, and my voice spilled out again. "Daniel, you are already inside." I tried to scream, but only a rasp came out. My throat locked. My body froze. It stepped closer. The room stretched with it, as though the walls bent outward to make space. The air smelled like rust and old nests, sharp and sickening. I grabbed the flashlight and aimed it straight at its eyes. The beam bent, swallowed, useless. Its head tilted, curious, like it was studying me. Then came the voices. Not one, all. The chamber's chorus, pouring through the staff room walls. My father, my mother, my sister, my own. They tangled together until the words melted into one message. Open the cages. The walls rippled. For a heartbeat, I swore I could see them. Stone cages behind the plaster. Things moving inside, pressing forward, waiting. The feather on the floor twitched harder, dragging itself toward the wall like a worm. The creature leaned closer. Smoke feathers brushed the ceiling, the walls, curling around me. And in that moment, I realized what the night watch really was. Not guarding the eagles, guarding it. Keeping the cages closed, keeping the cracks sealed, keeping the voices contained. And I had failed. The feather reached the wall and vanished into it, slipping through plaster as if it were water. A hairline crack traced upward in its place, glowing faintly. The creature's beak opened wider, and my own voice echoed louder. Then all the others. "Daniel, let us through." I staggered back against the cot, heart battering my ribs. My hand shook so violently, I dropped the flashlight again. The room tilted, the hum swelling until it was unbearable. I don't remember deciding. I only remember the knife, the one we used for cutting feed bags. My hand found it on the desk, the handle rough, the blade dull but sharp enough. I didn't strike the creature. I knew that wouldn't matter. I pressed the blade to my own arm. If it wanted me as a vessel, as a key, as an opening, then I would break the key. The cut was shallow at first, but the blood came fast, hot, real. The hum faltered just for a second. The creature's head snapped back, eyes flaring brighter. I cut again, deeper this time, across my palm. The blood spattered the cot, the wall, the floorboards. The voices screamed. Not words now, just rage. A chorus of fury that made the air quiver. The crack in the wall sealed. The feather curled in on itself and turned to ash. The shape in the beam shrieked, a sound that wasn't bird or human, but something older. The room folded in on itself, shadows buckling. And then I woke. Morning light burned my eyes through the tiny staff window. The cot beneath me was soaked, but not in blood. Water. Condensation dripping from the radiator above. The knife lay on the floor, clean. My arm bore no cuts, my palm unbroken. The wall was smooth, whole. But the logbook lay open on the desk, a fresh entry in my handwriting. I cut. I failed. I will try again tonight. And that's why I'm telling you this. Because when night falls, I'll be back in that room. And when the humming starts, I don't know if I'll have the strength to fight it again. If you ever hear the eagle speaking, don't listen. Don't step closer. Don't answer. Because once you do, you're already inside.